From Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar, Badioni Azane, Solitata Bazoga, Badioni Azane, Solitata Bazoga, away from Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar, Adioni Azania, Azania.
Hello, good afternoon, Zimbabwe. This is the voice of Moyo Alan, the chairman of the Poverty Liberation Movement. And here now we want to discuss the decay and the rot that is now engulfed the education sector in Zimbabwe. And we are taking this sectoral approach because we do feel that as the poor people of Zimbabwe, it is not the individual only who is affected, but an entire sector that is affected. And today we are focusing on what Makomborero Haruzivishe would say towards the collapsing education sector in Zimbabwe. And with me here, we've got Karen Mkwasi from the PADA platform, Tatenda Zuj Mandondo, who is the former spokesperson of the Zimbabwe National Students Union, and we have Wongai Zimudzi, who is a Section 20 team leader. Now, the whole discussion here was triggered by what the events of yesterday, which are the deadlock which took place between the government and the civil servants, a section of the civil servants, particularly those who are aligned to the National Joint Negotiations Council. Now, these traditionally were viewed as yellow unions, but now they've declared incapacitation when prior to they had never declared incapacitation. And it shows the level of the crisis in the education sector that is taking place in Zimbabwe. And now the greatest, the one who suffers greatest is the students, the pupil who's learning at any institution, because there are no teachers, there's no money to send them to school, and there is no COVID-19 preparedness. Now, I would like to ask my leader here from PADA, Karen, what do you feel, what do you think is the solution to the education crisis in Zimbabwe?
Thank you, Alan. It's a sad situation that we are in, because what really bothers me are the widening inequalities in education. Because here we have two different education systems that we have. We've got what is called the private education system and the public education system. As we are experiencing these labor issues with our teachers within the public institutions, we've got another system where children are learning and they continue to go ahead with the business of learning, and the children within the public institutions have teachers who are incapacitated, and there's no funding towards education as it is. So what I see here is a need for an approach that focuses on equality. A pro-poor approach, where we need a government that, for one instance, they need to think about the people, to stop thinking about politics, to stop thinking about the kind of leverage they have on the workers, but to really think about the future of this country. Because right now, as we see it, the future of this country is at stake. We used to have a country where the problem was brain drain, where we had such a vast number of educated people who could not find jobs in this country and were going to other countries. But right now, we are looking at a situation where there will be no brains to drain from Zimbabwe because we are simply not educating a whole generation. So I think right now the government just needs to acknowledge that, they failed over a long period of time, because the problem is they've failed to acknowledge failure for a long time. Look at last year when we had 2020 results for grade 7. They then blamed the teachers. Yes, the teachers had been saying it over and over again. The teachers had been saying it over and over again that there is need to address the labor issues. There is need to address the issue of government funding. So right now, they just need to acknowledge that there's been a long period of failure, and they start looking at approaches that will then address this failure. But the first step is this failure needs to be acknowledged.
Thank you very much, Karen. And you just reminded me of one of the concepts we used to discuss with my comrades like Zuiji, that the class antagonisms that are taking place in Zimbabwe, wherein the rich are able to send their children to school, the poor are not able to send their children to school. And even if the poor are able to, the teachers are not able to perform their duties. They are not able to go to work. Therefore, it is now the poor are not accessing education, thereby repeating the same, cycle of poverty over and over again, and in ever increasing numbers. And then the wealthy will continue being wealthy for generations and generations. And yet we are trying to close the gap between the rich and the poor. Now, tertiary students in general are a cross-section of the population of Zimbabwe. They reflect the socio-economic and political well-being of any nation. And you, as a former student leader who led on a national level, what are your views on the level, the state of the tertiary education system in Zimbabwe?
Well, basically, thank you, Alan. Basically, to be more frank, without fear or anything, I would like to categorically state that the problems that are rising within the education sector emanate from deep institutional rot. Like you look at the context we have, especially in Zimbabwe, starting from primary, secondary level, we have sort of like an intellectual or an academic drain within the syllabus that educational priorities are set. If anyone is to bother, I would encourage people to read The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. It speaks on the banking concept, on what students in Zimbabwe are put through. It's an institution whereby we have the government who try to, how can I put it without, I want to frame it in a way. I want to frame it in a way where, I want to frame it in a way whereby I don't become too direct. But we have an ignorant and unrepentant and arrogant government that is led by, like what Karen was saying, there's an issue of now where education is now it's now divided along class issues. It's now an issue of the haves and the have-nots. You look at the ministers, the president, even the vice president. Oh, okay, I can say the vice president. Their children, they don't bother about the education system in Zimbabwe. Post their children now learn what abroad. But now, when you come into the tertiary situation, you look at how they frame it. It's like they want to try and ZANU-ize everything and put it along the sector of ZANU-PF. Our campuses in Zimbabwe, mostly or against just generally, they are being converted into ZANU-PF basis. Yeah, you look at how. I'll give you a perfect example. At Harare Poly, Yoladam Situ, who was recently suspended, but her suspension was lifted today before a court judgment by the institution. She was suspended for hugging. This is just a microcosm of the macrocosm of what we have, the laws that legislate tertiary education in Zimbabwe. And then you go to the issues of student welfare. Students are suffering. You as a student, you understand. Me as a former student, I understand. And people who've been into tertiary institutions, they understand the struggle students go through. This is what we would often discuss and put across with Comrade Mako, That's why I'm here to honor his fight for a better education system in Zimbabwe. That students in Zimbabwe, we are not free. Basically, we are cocooned into a shell of misery and hope. And even after graduation, there is no future to look forward to. There's no life to talk to. Basically, we're just existing and going along with the wind. So I think this is a situation when we need to look at and dissect on what we can do as a nation, because it's no longer the issue of saying, no, me, I'm not in university, me, I'm not in a college of any sort. But the issue of education is paramount in every society. You look at what Nelson Mandela said, what Kofi Annan said, that illiteracy is the shift from hope to misery. And literacy is the shift from hope to misery. And if we keep on going along the trajectory, we are being led by the current regime, whereby they are not even considering the plight of students with reality on the ground, then we are going nowhere.
Thank you very much, Switch. I do believe that you brought out the aspect of human capital development and how I do believe now that human capital development is inextricably bound to the development of any nation. So I would like to ask my sister Wongai, as a young person who has been involved in activism of various sorts for quite some time. Wongai, the youth are suffering. We have been suffering from a brain drain, a continuous brain drain, and there's a risk of having no brains to drain because of the collapse of the education sector. Now, as a young person, what are your views towards the collapse of the education sector in Zimbabwe?
I, like the previous speakers, do think that it's all about governance and the priorities that our leaders decide to take. I like to base my arguments on what the Constitution says. You'll find that Section 75B of the Constitution, it says that the state must take reasonable action towards the progressive achievement of the right to education. And the right to education is stated 3 times to show its emphasis or the strength of this particular right, of which it really speaks much on the right to free and basic education. And part of the education sector, it also entails the welfare of the teachers. And like what you were saying, that yesterday there was a standstill between the teachers' unions and the government. That alone, it shows that there is a miscommunication or there's no commitment from the government towards achieving quality education in the country. You find that, when I was looking at statistics, when I was praying for this panel, you find that 13% of the resources that we channeled for 2021, only 13% was channeled towards education, while at least 24% was channeled towards security. It means that the priorities of our government are wrong. They are more comfortable in placing much resources to security, where they can comfort themselves, where they can prove themselves from uprisings, where they can safeguard themselves from people like Makomborero and also other activists who raise up voices against misgovernance, against lootings, and against this poor handling that they are having towards teachers. So that alone is the first point we were supposed to look at this, that, okay, so our government isn't really concerned about education. They really do care less. You find that last year, children were forced to write exams, yet they had spent less than a month in class, and they were forced to go and write exams. No wonder why the results that they produced were of poor quality and poor standard. So already we don't have a caring government as far as education is concerned. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. Now, I've realized that the government has sort of relegated the concept, the whole sector of education to itself, like in a super neoliberal, perspective. Now, the private sector, the private schools, the tertiary institutions have now adopted alternative teaching methods, right? And these methods in general, some of them are not accessible to the poor people. Some of them are quite, to describe them best, they're just cantankerous, considering the prevailing state in Zimbabwe. Now, Leader Karen, what do you think are the best alternative teaching methods that can be employed in the light of COVID-19 and in the light of, teachers not being able to work? What would you suggest?
Okay, I think, like you rightly point out, there is no one size fits all, because we are looking at some children who are in homes where they've got access to Wi-Fi all the time. Then we are looking at some other children where you find they can get access to Wi-Fi using maybe mobile data. And then we have children who do not have access to any kind of smart device. At best, they can find, the simple analog phone, Kambudzi. That's for them, that's their interaction with this mobile phone technology. So I think there's need to really deliberate approaches that are tailor-made for the constituency that we're trying to serve. Because we can't just say it's going to be online learning. First of all, I have not come across any solid online teaching strategy that has been produced by the Minister of Education. I've tried to look around. I came across a platform that's on my class that government schools are encouraged to use. I go there, all I find is the syllabus. I go there, I try to go through it, and I've not seen how it's even going to work for someone in the rural areas, because that platform, you can access it. It's a web-based platform. So already, if it's a web-based platform, then how is someone in the rural areas going to access that? So there's need for, it's very worrying that there hasn't been we haven't seen any findings from research that has already been done in terms of what is the internet, what is the real internet penetration in Zimbabwe? And for where there's no, because there are there are places where there's total blackout in terms of any kind of network, even that, for just the mobile network. There are places where there's total blackout. But do we have a list of those places? And is there a solution in place? Do we have a strategy in place for that? I haven't seen that. So in terms of alternative learning, I think there's need to design multiple platforms where we can have the online learning going on, but then we can also even have apps where for those maybe that are designed for those who maybe cannot access web-based platforms throughout. But then they can at least maybe download an app onto a smartphone and be able to access lessons. And then we now need the kind of package where we go offline, where maybe we are using the radio, we are using radios, because I saw there were radio programs at some time during lockdown. If those radio programs were effective, then we would have had more passes for our grade 7s. Because they were saying that there was the government remote learning strategy. It was this radio where everyone in the country had, if you had a certain child in grade 7 at a certain point, you had to all log in at the same time. Which is not, and not even taking into consideration that, we are in different communities, where maybe a time that works in Harare will not work for someone who's in Tolocho. So there's need, I would rather have this being community-based, where maybe we have, maybe at least at the provincial level to begin with. And then there should be consultations. You can't just wake up today and say you've got radio programs. Have you consulted the teachers who are teaching these children you intend to teach on radio? Or you just recruited a number of teachers and said, please come and teach on radio? Because I think you also need to consult the people who are teaching these children. And these people are in the classroom. They have access to this. They can even tell you that, where I'm teaching, this will not work. They're members of that community, but I don't see how we are really consulting stakeholders. So in order to build alternative learning spaces for children, there has to be better stakeholder consultation. And then, when you look at other countries, you find that they manage to have, something that's been coordinated by government, where schools were able to print out lessons that would be picked up from the schools, and then the children would bring them back, because that's minimum exposure. It's just maybe a parent going to school on a Monday to pick up lessons, and then Wednesday, to maybe return and exactly, and rather because we know that our government schools cannot afford the sophisticated learner management platforms that that the private schools have. But there can be learning management platforms that are actually not online. We can start finding ways of doing that. But as long as we continue on this trajectory where the government is maybe sitting back and saying, no, but we didn't cause COVID, what do you expect us to do? Because that, for me, that sounds like the attitude where we are comfortable with children being out of school for 6 months and then sending them back to write exams there and then. And then we are in another wave, we find that children cannot even go back. Like there's this ad hoc planning that goes on where I don't think someone is really sitting down and mapping the scenarios to say, okay, so if this happens, this is what we are going to do. And then if this happens, this is how we are going to do. Because there should be a plan in place by now. Because right now we don't even know. Look at the school, there's a boarding school in Mzingwane where we got 50, but it was more than 50 cases.
Yeah.
It was more than 50 cases because they contributed to the surge yesterday. That's how it started at John Talak. We had a school with these cases, it went up, and then all of a sudden we are in the midst of a wave. So this could actually be the beginning of a third wave. Because tomorrow we have these children at school, right? Now, maybe you test more, you test the community where they are at, and suddenly we are getting 300-400 cases a day and it spirals. It happened. It happened in December and January. So, but I don't see this proactive approach that says, if it happens this time, this is the plan that we have in place. So I think there is need for just this, there's need for a comprehensive approach that realizes that students are diverse, and we have to tailor make something for every child to make sure that there is no child who's going to say no we'll wait until schools open, because we can have a situation where schools don't open at all.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karen. Now, coming back to Tatenda Zuj Mandondo, now, we have this situation where learners are not accessing. In fact, there is no equal distribution of education, if there is such a term, but there is an unequal access to education in Zimbabwe, as proved by Karen right now. Now, as an honest political scientist, what do you think are the labor relations, the benefactors, that is the parents who send their children to school? What is the relationship between them right now?
Okay, to start off, I have to be like what you asked of me. I have to be more practical in what we always say in our native tongue. That the problem we have within Zimbabwe right now is that our government is always adopts a command element. While the command element might have worked for agriculture, it will never work in education, because definitely students are not crops that you can just wish upon your weather to sell for autocorrect. The reality, like you were saying, that there should be equal education. There's SDG goal number 4, Sustainable Development Goal number 4, it speaks about equitable and quality education for all children. Zimbabwe, I don't think we're even in the 10%, we've reached even 10% of accessing that. Because if you go into the rural areas, like my heart bleeds when I visit rural areas and visit the schools. You see dilapidated infrastructure. You see kids walking for 20 to 25 Ks just to access learning facilities. And then now you have a whole government minister saying children should go back into classrooms and write exams. Ushering them, it's like basically ushering students for a slaughter, because the grade 7 results reflected that. And right now you have a situation where the government also has suspended June examinations. Mind you, that was a very good move. But now it was a case of a little too late, because they've been turning a blind eye and a deaf ear towards concerns being raised by critical stakeholders, starting from the teachers and also the parents. You're asking about the relationship of the parents. Parents, they talk about these issues, but I don't think as parents, I can call myself a parent because I'm technically responsible for my siblings to be able to go to school. These are the issues we face. We are not real to each other. We are not real towards the government. the blame game is always shifted on teachers, but yet we know the core or the crux of the problem. We have a government that generally unilaterally makes decisions. They don't negotiate or discuss with critical stakeholders within the education sector. Like recently, they offer that NJNC meeting whereby they wanted to talk about the issue of salary raise for teachers. And then there was a stalemate. And then, lo and behold, a few days later, in typical Zanu-PF fashion, they announced a pay increase through social media, through newspaper, through mass media. But they were not specific. I think we should look at the issue, to be honest, because at this point, for us to be able to focus on the price, negotiating or trying to negotiate with Zanu-PF right now is a waste of time. I think we need collective action on the part of parents, on the part of teachers, and every civil servant, and even those who are not in the civil service. They should speak out against such injustices, such abuses. Basically, especially in light of COVID-19, we've had serious academic disruptions. But for us to salvage the academic future for the current generations and the generations to follow, we need a practical solution, not just to wish upon a star and then our problems will go away. No, I think we need to self-evaluate and self-introspect as a nation on what we want to achieve.
Thank you very much, Comrade Zuj. Now, Wongai, I want us to look at the school as an interface point wherein citizens are able to see whether their government is responsive or it's not. For example, in fact, typically you have the benefactors, the parents, the guardians, whosoever is paying for a particular child's fees, right? And then you have the teachers who are underpaid, sometimes they're brutalized, arrested and everything. And then that's on one side. And then the student is on that side too, not being able to access education and everything. So this grouping is this interface at this school, this particular school, right? And then on the other part, there is the almighty government, which has been proven by all of you here, is doing nothing about it. It's actually lying to teachers, lying to parents, lying to everyone who is involved in the education sector.
Themselves.
And they lie to themselves from time to time.
Before you go forward, I wanted just to raise the point that the current administration we have right now, they have an ostrich mentality where they think if they bury their head into the ground, the problems will naturally disappear. Like you saw what happened with the last lockdown. They promised to increase salaries, and then when the lockdown was effected, they gave an excuse, because this government is an excuse. It runs on excuses. It was sanctions. It was the Western-funded opposition. It's Makomborero Haruzivishe. It's Alan Moyo. It's Hoko Chimono. It's basically to be everyone. So we are going now.
So now, Vladimir Lenin, right, asked the critical question, the most critical question in any struggle: what is to be done? So this is now a question I'm posing to all of you. What do you think has to be done? Why? How? And you may add whatever premise you may wish, but what is to be done?
So I should go.
Okay.
Yeah, like everyone here is presenting important arguments, and they're presenting. And the sad part is that it's not starting here. It just didn't start here. These conversations has been ongoing since time immemorial. And now that I'm just reflecting on what every person was saying, it's not necessarily about the education system. It's not just about that sector alone. Even about us young people, we're finding ourselves decentralized from quite a lot of things. There's quite a lot of problems floating around. And it's all, the common denominator of this is the government. The government not doing what it's supposed to be doing, the government not abiding by the constitution, the government looting resources which are meant for public service and public delivery. But unfortunately, us as citizens, I don't know what has happened to us. We are so docile. And as parents, we are just so comfortable with paying extra lessons for our children to get lessons from their teachers. Because now teachers, I've got a relative of mine who is a teacher who was telling me that one guy, I'm just going to school just to sit and wait for lunch hour. After lunch hour, then the kids that I'm having private lessons with then come and then start doing learnings. So if a parent now then doesn't pay for those extra lessons, then it means that their child is going to be disadvantaged. So what to do now? I think we now need to find consensus amongst ourselves as citizens, saying that no, I think enough is enough. We can't just now let the government get out with the barest minimum. In 2018, when ZANU-PF was campaigning, shame, they sold us dreams. They sold teachers' dreams. When Mnangagwa came in on board, he told civil servants that we're going to be giving you money, restoration. What was the name? Restore legacy. They're going to be restoring the education system. They're going to be doing A, B, C, D, selling us dreams. But now, those are just dreams. So I feel like we now need to get much more serious in terms of our approach to the government of saying, okay, we are now just not going to let you just come over us and top on top of us. We now need you to meet the other half of the bargain. And how we can do that, we can have a dialogue and then we can map a way forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Fongai. You have tackled the why aspect of what is to be done, and thank you very much for executing it religiously. Now, coming back to my brother Tatenda Zuj, she has tackled the why part. Now, will you help us with the how part? Since you are now a veteran activist, you have more experience than most of us, so you have an understanding and an appreciation of how that collective action or that what has to be done can be done.
Well, I think if we were to answer that question, we have to be honest with ourselves. Like what I said, painting the reality on the ground. First and foremost, for us, the how part, that's what you want, right?
Yes.
Resist and defy. Now there's no longer the time to sit in our imagined comfort zones and say everything is okay, everything is fine. When you have I think an above standard, when an above average student coming back home with 17, 20 units, and you have a student also coming back home with less than 2 subjects, and you have also a student in tertiary institutions not being able to finish their degrees because of various and numerous circumstances. This is now the time to socially conscientize the entire society within the framework of Zimbabwe. Even those in the diaspora, this is the time for them to raise their voice. I was looking at one of the campaigns being currently undertaken by the Amalgamated Teachers Union in Zimbabwe, the hashtag Save Our Education Zimbabwe campaign, and also the 545 campaign, the 5 million voices for 5 million learners. Those are the campaigns that lay the foundation for change to actually take place. Parents and the entire society should be part of that framework to shape the dimension that the nation or the education sector should take. Because some might be saying, no, they are tired, they no longer feel comfortable to keep on fighting this struggle. But there's always, I live by a code that says that change in all essence, it can be slow and ponderous. But when things come to a head, it can be sudden and cataclysmic, toppling previously unshakable systems. And if you look at the point we are now in Zimbabwe, we've now come to a head where we should not wait for circumstances, but rather we should drive ourselves towards changing the entire framework. As you know, the fish always rot from the head, and in its effect, not a fallacy. I think we should look at how we can negotiate with the heads not to stink the whole fish or not to rot the whole fish, because we need the future of this nation. I was talking to one of I'll call him Old Madala. He's around 80 years old, staying in the same neighborhood. He was frank to me yesterday. He said, young people in Zimbabwe have no future. There's no future literally to talk about. This is the kind of situation you see whereby if we remain quiet, then we are reaching nowhere. So now this is the point for, well, like I said, it's organize, resist, and defy.
You've just reminded me of a proverb that I usually heard from my grandfather. He would say, "Uyu anokurukura ndiye ane gashu muhuro, ari muriva anoti denga ravo." The very fact that we're able here to discuss these issues means that we do have a noose around our necks, right? And we're still able to discuss, to negotiate, to think actually. But had it been a red trap, we would have been dead already. So we do have the capacity.
You see the point. The problem we have with our citizens, even amongst us, we fear. Fear is very dangerous. To some extent, personally, there were moments I would be very, very fearful. But then when I look at comrades like Mako, they were fearless characters. And I'm here to tell Zimbabwe that there's nothing really special about Mnangagwa. Mnangagwa was just a student like us. He was actually, at one point, he was around our age. And then, you know, the laws of nature, they always lead you towards advancing. But what I'm trying to say is that we should not be afraid to speak our minds. Yes, they will try to claim down, they will try to make examples, but if not us, then who? That should be the question.
Now, you have introduced a concept that so many of us shun. So many people try to run away from the whole concept of fear. In the Arab world, I saw the death of fear with my eyes. I saw people rising up against dictators who had tanks, with the chairman Maos, who stood up against entire armies, the Fidel Castros, the Che Guevaras. Fear literally died in them. So Karen, what do you think is the best way to solve the fear equation so that fear in itself is cancelled out and remain with bold, courageous leadership?
Okay, I think, the issue of fear, you have to ask yourself, what are you really afraid of? I think and then when we look at what we are afraid of what's going to happen to us today or tomorrow, isn't it? But then, are you not afraid of the future? Are you not afraid for the future of this country? Because when I look at raising children in a country where I'm not even guaranteed that they'll be able to get an education, now that frightens me. So I think we need to get to a point where we connect with the people. And, because unfortunately the issue of education has been, it can never be a partisan issue. Because I think it's been reduced to politics over and over again. But I think this is now the time to say, you know what, this is not a partisan issue. There are no special schools for ZANU-PF children. So I think one of the things, we need to just find a way to communicate with the people. Because sometimes we don't communicate. I think we are communicating we are all saying the right thing, but we are in these very small clusters where someone is saying, if I join the cluster where Alan is, Alan, I'm going to be next. So, Alan is a target. And then, no, I can't join Natus. They're being dismissed as a regime change. Those are just divide and rule tactics. So, but if we get to the bottom of the divide and rule tactics, then we find, first of all, these teachers, they don't want our children to fail. They want our children to pass. If they wanted our children to fail, they would simply go to the classroom, sit and do nothing. But the reason why are they speaking out is because they're also concerned about the results that are produced in the classroom. They also don't want to go into a classroom where they know there are no resources. They don't want to teach children and to know that the moment these children are locked down, we don't have any way of reaching. So they are simply saying to the people, you know what, let's find a way. Because I know, there's strength in numbers.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But the fact that we've got individuals speaking out, it becomes, when you've got this union speaking out, then you've got ATU speaking out, it becomes, Masaraore's agenda. You've got PTU said it's Majongwe's agenda. Movements are attached to people, unfortunately. If you speak against the government, you are now on a Chamisa trajectory. Like everything has to be about someone. So, which is even when we were speaking up for Makomborero, we're not even speaking up for an individual, we're speaking up for a whole system. That's how we have to speak up for education. So when we talk to the people, we need to be able to tell the people what's at stake. When people know what's at stake, then they will act. Then they'll realize that what's more frightening is what's at stake. Because everyone wants a brighter future for their children.
Yeah, true.
So if you keep on paying, you start paying these private lessons for your child, we go into these dubious exams where even we are not even confident of the evaluation process. Imagine the kind of people we'll have in our offices in the near future. People who were not taught, and then we were told that they've been taught, they've passed. So I think we need to communicate the real issues that are at stake. People are afraid because they don't understand they don't even understand what the people who are fighting in this country, they don't understand what they're fighting for. So when you look at look at the liberation struggle, we had old women, we had very young women, we had old men, we had 15-year-olds, leaving school. They understood what they were not afraid, because they understood. They were afraid more of remaining under an imperialist regime that did not recognize their rights as Black people. So, you were 15 and you realized that if I'm still here 10 years from now, then I'm going to grow up in a country where I become an adult, but I'm not even recognized as one. Mm-hmm. So maybe I'm more afraid of not being recognized as a human being 10 years down the line, rather than more than the fear that I have for dying in the bush. So that's just the issue. People need to understand that, when education is in crisis, we've got a whole future at stake.
Thank you very much, Karen. And if I'm to use what you have said as premises, right, and what Zuj said is another premise, right, I would realize that you mentioned a campaign, 5 million voices for 5 million children. And those 5 million voices are not children's voices. They're citizens' voices, they're benefactors' voices, they're interested parties' voices. That's literally everyone's voice. You see, now, Dr. Noah Harari, Yuval, argues in Sapiens that why the Homo sapien managed to conquer every other humankind, like the Neanderthals and everything, it is because of its ability to cooperate. The human is able to kill an elephant because of its ability to cooperate. The human is able to conquer space because of its ability to cooperate. The one who makes the glass, the one who makes the steel, the one who makes the engine, the one who designs, the one who does everything. It's different people, but all bringing out one product and one agenda. So I would like my brother Zuj to maybe help us, right? Since we now have discovered that there's a campaign going on for education, right? And I do feel that all of us here should add our voices into that campaign, should propagate that campaign as much as we can. Now, Comrade Zuj, will you please expagorate the campaign for us? Will you help us, how we can add our input?
Okay. Basically, what the campaign is about is taking a pledge towards raising critical issues with the powers to be, or the responsible authorities within the education sector to take action. And these voices, they are not like what you mentioned, not necessarily learners' voices only, but citizens' voices within the entire breadth of Zimbabwe, whereby they show their support by demanding that the government takes action towards improving the quality of education, and not just the quantity, of saying that the children are going to school, yet we know there's nothing literally going on the ground. So I think Zimbabweans should take part and in this campaign, and also like the other campaign I mentioned, the Safe for Education campaign, which speaks towards resuscitating the education sector. Because as we speak right now, the education sector is in a comatose state. Literally, it's dying, or it's already dead, and we're just left with a cadaver. So, well, like what wanted to comment on what Karen said about the issue of people paying allegiance to individuals more than ideas. It's a very dangerous precedent when we have by trying to in creating cult figures within our society, because we will be trained of all common sense. Because when you worship an individual, common sense will no longer be common to you. The basics won't be basic to you. You basically be a puppet. So I want to encourage Zimbabweans that when we talk of not having fear, it's actually impossible for a human being not to have fear. Yes, you might be afraid that this regime, you might be afraid of a knock at the door in the night, you might be afraid of them coming after you, but it's not necessarily the absence of fear that makes a good citizen, but it's the ability not to let that fear overcome you. That what makes you a great fighter or a productive citizen of the community. Uh, it's not like promoting use of violence, non-violent measures to like the concept of Sachkagra, non-violent resistance to evil is a very good idea. At one point you had teachers marching from Mutare to Harare to show their displeasure at the government, and at first they were dismissed, but then later on, when they started gaining national momentum, that's when you saw the state starting to descend upon them. The state is basically in a knee-jerk mode or knee-jerk reaction. Whatever they do is just reacting to the situations that they think threaten their power. But in terms of citizen welfare, it's a very, very sorry state. I saw this instance at Midland State University, whereby students basically went for 2 weeks, one for learning and one for exams. And they were talking of writing a thesis, a dissertation, which is something that is not easy. You have half-baked graduates who won't push the national agenda of productivity and continuity forward. So I think right now is the time, like what I said, for us to ask a very critical national question that if not us, then who?
Thank you very much, Zoe, for asking that very, very critical question. Now, I've enjoyed this discussion, and I hope all of us have learned something. And on behalf of the Poverty Liberation Movement, I would like to thank you, our guests, and would like to thank everyone who was watching. Would like to thank the whole world. Now, any parting shots from all of you, like just a minute each?
Yeah, I think my parting shots, what I would really like to say is, our education really, it's something that we had for a very long time, even after we had nothing. And it's still at a point where we can save it, but we need to act now. We need to act now, and we need to find a way of working together. It doesn't matter what political party you support, you all want your children in school. So maybe we can, if we all come together, I'm sure we can convince the government to move away from this reactionary politics, and we can get to a point where development can, where we have development on the table, and that way every technical expert can now come together as a stakeholder, and really we can build this education sector. And I think all of us, we are all willing to become voices for all those learners. I'm a beneficiary of a very good education system. I really, I managed to go to school in a better Zimbabwe, and I think it will be selfish of me to say no, I'm afraid, because I think it's now time to give back. So let's all come together and be the voices of the learners, and even be the voices of the teachers who are teaching our children at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, my parting shot probably may sound a little more of ambitious, but I want to address the President of this Republic in absentia, that Mr. Mnangagwa, education in Zimbabwe is in a very serious crisis. Education is underfunded. The quality of education is downgraded from the quality we had after gaining independence, and the quality that drove Zimbabwe to the pinnacle of academic excellence in Africa, and indeed as a shining light in the world. We have rural schools that seriously need attending to. We have tertiary institutions that that really need that freedom of thought and expression, academic freedom. Is basically what students in tertiary institutions want: affordable education. And one last thing, we need a proper economy. We need jobs. Talking from a perspective of tertiary institutions, when tertiary students graduate, what they want are jobs. They want a productive future. So, if education is attended to, then we can definitely talk of a future. But if education is destroyed, then we can talk of nothing at all. It will be a chaotic situation whereby we would have driven ourselves back 200 years back, or because of the arrogance of a few individuals.
Thank you very much, Comrade Zuj. Bongai.
My parting shot would be to all parents or to all guidance who are paying school fees for their children. So here's the scenario. Yes, you're paying your money, but then the teachers are not teaching your children because of poor salaries. So what's going to happen is that your child is going to fail. And when your child fails, they have to rewrite the public examinations. And when they're rewriting, it means that it's also 1 year of you checking out your money, your hard-earned money, in order to bring them back in the educational system. So it's either you act now and then you save for next year and the couple of years to come, or you can just pay the barest minimum and keep quiet and continue reading issues between the teachers and the government as stories in Herald or in Newsday.
Okay, I think
So that's it. You have to choose what you want.
So it's a matter of choice.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Bongai. Thank you very much, Zuj. Thank you very much, Karen. Now we've come to the end of our discussion. This is the Poverty Liberation Movement, and yes, we're still speaking for the poor. Thank you.